Good Monday morning, Market Chameleons, and everyone joining us for the first time. Thanks for coming by and checking out the Market Chameleon pre-market show with this man, Dimitri Pargamonic. How are you doing, D?
Good morning, Will. How are you?
Good. You want to start with the disclaimer?
Yep. Good morning, everyone. Before we get started, keep in mind, Will and I and Market Chameleon, we're not a registered investment advisor. We're not a broker dealer. We're not telling you what to do. We're just sharing ideas. If you need advice, call your registered investment advisor, call your broker. That's what they're there for. There's the disclaimer.
Excellent.
And I'm going to share my screen. While I'm doing that, if you're joining us for the first time, as a quick note, Will and I, we do these shows in the morning to try to help answer questions you may have about the Market Chameleon tools, the data, the analytics. If you have a question, you could type it into that live chat on YouTube. Will's watching it. If you want to come on a show and ask your question live, we provide a link to Zoom. So click on it, click on that link. Once you get into Zoom, click on that button, raise your hand. That lets us know you have a question. Once we let you in, you could ask your question live, navigate us to where you're looking at. So those are two ways to ask questions and to take a few minutes to give you guys a chance to put those questions in. We'll start out taking a look at the pre-market report, see if we could get insights, what's going on in pre-market hours, and then we'll move on to the questions. All right, so pre-market report, these are stocks trading in pre-market hours. We'll start out up here. We have a calendar view, and if you go back in time, you can select date, see what happened in the pre-market hours that date. Today, we're October 30th, and this is from a high level what's going on. We have 494 stocks trading higher in the pre-market hours, 209 stocks trading lower. As far as volume, we have 78.3 million shares trading on up volume versus 38.6 million shares trading on down volume. And if we convert that volume to dollar value, we got $2 billion worth of stock trading higher versus $392 million worth of stock trading lower. So far, from that perspective, looks like trading in the pre-market hours has some bullish sentiment. Let's look at it from a couple more perspectives. So we're going to come down here, and we got three lists. We have our most active stocks in the pre-market hours, our biggest percentage gainers and biggest percentage decliners. We have 123 stocks that made our biggest percentage gainers list, 36 on our decliners. So also that from this perspective looks like there's more bullish bias in the pre-market. And if you look at this list, we have stocks that are small cap stocks in here. We do have ETFs in there. It could be a leverage product. And pretty much any security, if it's listed on a major U.S. exchange, if it's trading in pre-market hours, it meets certain thresholds that we set for liquidity, volume, and price. It could make this list. And to narrow down this list to a smaller group, we could use the filters here above. So if you have a watch list, you can filter by your watch list. I'm going to use this one in ETF. And when you click on that, you get a drop-down menu to select from. So we got some broad-based ETFs, some sector ETFs to choose from. Let's do this one, SPY, that's the S&P 500 ETF. When you click on that, the list below will get filtered by stocks that are holdings in the SPY ETF, which are the S&P 500 constituents. And here we have 11 stocks made our percentage gainers list, 4 on our decliners. So also there looks like trading in the pre-market hours is leaning towards the bullish side of things. And so we gave it a couple minutes. Well, I could take some questions if you have them.
Nothing's popped up yet.
Okay. Um, so I guess well, let's stay on this report for now. See if we get more questions, but in this list, you see there are earnings coming out. So here's one. McDonald's just came out with earnings. So this little E here, that's an indicator that earnings were released and the stock is most likely reacting to those earnings announcements. So we could kind of click on here. If you click on, we'll just click on McDonald's here. You get a pop-up below with more details on the pre-market movement. So here, McDonald's, we see close to 55.76 in the pre-market hours. It's trading $262.50. So that's up 2.6%. Right. This is the pre-market VWAP, volume weighted average price. This is the high low we traded in the pre-market hours, the total volume. Some more data there on the float. And if we come down here, you could see here, like really the trading. So to talk about the pre-market, the pre-market itself, really, 4 a.m. is like where they start, allowing it. So usually 4 a.m. is the earliest, but you don't really see a lot of trading or barely anything until the news cycle hits around 7. So here we can see the pre-market by time. So you can see here's where the volume and the trading really starts. Lots of people ask, well, about 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. Yeah, they allow, but you barely see any type of trading, until really around 7 a.m. is really where you start seeing things start kicking in. So this is the chart in the pre-market hours for McDonald's. Down here, this is a breakdown of the volume and the concentration of prices, like where most of that volume traded. So these are VWAP bars. You can see here the big one here. The biggest one is where McDonald's traded between $262.04, $262.65. Okay. Not a lot below or above, but this is where it's concentrated most of the volume. If we wanted to look at that volume for further breakdown, this over here shows the breakdown by trade size type. So small retail, professional, institutional. And here it looks like, you got pretty much, all types of traders participating in the McDonald's shares in the pre-market. Over here, we have a breakdown of the volume between the lit exchanges and dark pools. So if we look at the biggest volume bar here, that looks like the volume is split between the lit and dark exchanges, right? So over there's a lot of liquidity in the dark pool. As a matter of fact, like that's where the most of it, the liquidity in the dark pool is a little bit above. You could see below, not much going on in the dark pools. So what this is letting us know is that here, prices below, those traders at that time had to access most of that liquidity on the lit exchanges, on the public exchanges. Okay. Once they got up here, we saw a little bit more liquidity, not up here. So that kind of just gives us a sense of the liquidity in the private networks, dark pools, and the lit exchanges. And usually, the lit exchanges, the public exchanges would be the last resort of liquidity you can access right? Because if you wanted to get, if you're looking for liquidity, you probably want to go see if you could get it in a dark pool first. Because there, if you could get in a dark pool, you're not forced to move the markets by taking the liquidity off the limit order book. Hopefully that makes sense. And if we come down here a little bit further, we get a breakdown of the trading minute by minute. So if you wanted to go in there and start to analyze it in more detail, how the trading is progressing, here you have a minute by minute VWAP stats. And these are the summary stats here. Let's take a look at it since it's earnings. Let's take a look at, we have these other tabs in here. So we could take a look at the earnings tab. And this shows us the distribution of returns, stock returns around earnings. So you could see statistically how the stock tended to behave around earnings. All right, so here we have the last 12 earnings. These are the dates. All right, this is the day of earnings. So this is looking at what would be, after they reported earnings, the reaction after reporting earnings. So if we start out the opening gap, which is, right at the open, and if the pre-market is an indication, we're right now up 2.6% prior to the open. So we see 67% of the time, the stock tended to gap up higher at the open, 25% lower. There's like an unchanged over here. On average, gained 0.7%. If we looked at the magnitude of the moves historically, this is telling us the absolute average. So on average, the stock moved up or down 1.4% at the open, with a high move of 4.7 and low unchanged here. So here, 2.6%. We're above the average right now, but within the high-low range. Okay, so that's where we're at right now in the pre-market hours. All right, a little bit higher than the average. So we're, you could see a couple over here moved that much. After the market opens, how does the stock behave? So let's say, okay, we open, we're up. That's the new price at the open. Then what tends to happen? So then we measure the movements from the open of the day to the high of the day, then from the open to the low of the day, and from the open to the close of the day. All right, so we're going to take a look at those three. So from the open to the high of the day, the average move is 1.4% historically. From the open to the low of the day, the historical move on average was down 1.6%, which, it tells us that it's pretty much even to the high and to the low. The movement, maybe a little bit, it tended to be a little bit less liquid to the downside, or a little bit more volatile to the downside than to the upside, right? So the magnitude of the moves a little bit more volatile to the downside. We got 1.4 versus 1.6, but very similar, not a lot. And if we looked at the drift from the open to the close, we could see it tended to go higher a little bit more often than lower, 50 versus 42%. But let's just say it's like 50-50 at this point. And the magnitude of the move from the open to the close was 1.5% in either direction. So you could see that the volatility at the opening gap, 1.4%, And from the open to the close, 1.5% is similar. So just as much as, you know, that a lot of the volatility can happen between the open and the close, right? A lot of the movement, 1.5%. Here with a high move of 6%, low move of 0.3. All right, so that's quickly a historical return distribution of McDonald's earnings after reporting earnings. And you know, this is how it did after the close. And if we wanted to look at McDonald's further, let's say we wanted to expand it. I'm going to go to McDonald's here. So when we go to McDonald's, there's these interactive charts. Let's go over here, earnings. So we have these interactive charts. Here you have a summary, and then over here we have different reports to click on. Okay, so under earnings, interactive charts, we have these different reports. We could look at the historical earnings, implied earnings move, actual moves. So let's take a look at the actual moves. So this is going beyond the 12 quarters. We're going back all the way to 2014. And these are the moves on the day. So you could see here that that line over here going all the way across, that's the average of all the moves, 2.1% up or down, the average, absolute average of all the moves. And you could see when it was above that line, you know, sometimes it was above that line by a pretty decent amount, you know, especially if we go back all the way over here in 2015. This over here, the last one, that blue bar is showing what the implied move was heading into this earnings. So these green are the actual moves up, the red are the actual moves down. This blue one is showing us this is what the move was implying from the option prices heading into this earnings. All right, so you could see it was implying above that 2.1 average. If we look at all the moves, you can see it on average 2.1%, high move of 8.1, low of 0.1%, median move 1.5%. So that's from the previous day's close to the next day's. We could also see that half the moves were up, half the moves were down. So that's 50-50. But let's say we wanted to look at just the third quarter, because this is right now, McDonald's just reported third quarter. We could go over here and select Q3. And when we do that, the table below will show us stats for only Q3 earnings. All right. So Q3 earnings looks a little bit different here. First of all, the stock was up 70% of the time, down 30%. So it looks like Q3 stock performed historically better than the other quarters, right? So look, if we just did all of them, you see all of them, we got 50-50, stock up 50%, down 50%. If we just isolated Q3, you got a little bit of a different story. It was up more often, down. As far as the volatility of the moves, we could see that it was a little bit more volatile. So the average move was 3.4% up or down for Q3, high move of 8, low move 0.3, and the median move of 2.9%. All right, so you guys see this. So look, see here, these are the absolute average moves for Q3. So if I go to all, remember 3.4, you can see it falls to 2.1, median move 1.5. So Q3, couple observations that the stock tended to be more volatile, bigger moves than the other quarters. Okay, than all the quarters combined, bigger moves. And it was slightly more bullish bias. Okay, and these are the simple averages here. What if we just looked at the opening gaps? So this is the move from the open to the close. Let's do the opening gaps only. So opening gaps here. So here are the opening gaps. So this would be from the previous day's close to the opening price. All right. This is showing the historical opening moves. We got them in the red and the green. Absolute average move 1.8% with a high of 7.7, low of 0. 64% of them were higher, 33% lower. So let's compare that to Q3 now. If Q3 looks different. So let's click on Q3. So here are the opening gaps. So 78% of them were higher versus 22 lower. So we could see, for whatever reason, historically, it tended to perform better in Q3 than the rest of the quarter, all the quarters combined. The move to the upside, I'm sorry, the absolute average move also tended to be higher. So we're looking at a 3% move up or down versus 1.8% when we include all the quarters. All right, so you guys see that Q3 absolute average move 3% with a little bit more upward bias. So that's looking at the opening gap, which if we open around here, you know, so far in a pre-market, the indication is we're trading up 2.5%. All right, so that looks closer in line to what usually the Q3 looks like than the rest. All right, because if we did all of them, we could see that 1.8%. You know, we're above that average. If we go to Q3, you know, we're closer in line with this. There's the median move, 2.4%, so much closer to what it usually does in Q3 or third quarter earnings announcements. So we did the actual moves, opening gaps. Let's do the intraday drift now. So remember, opening gaps, that's from the previous close to the next day open. What about from the open to the close? So if we looked at all of them from the open to the close, we got about, on average, a 1.4% move up or down, a median move of 1.1%, split between up and down 50-50. So that's looking at all the quarters going back to 2014. What if we just looked at third quarter to see if it looks different? So Q3, click on that. And now we got a little bit of different story, a little bit more bullish to the upside, and a little bit more volatile, 1.9% versus, let me see that again. So we could see 1.4% on average, the move from open to close, that's absolute average, median move of 1.1. So let's see Q3. So that's interesting. The median move is a little bit lower, average move is higher. So that could be due to this one big bar over here. So that's the intraday drift. So what do? We looked at the move, the actual earnings move from close to close. We looked at the opening gap move, that's from previous day's close to the open, and then we looked at the intraday move, that's after the stock opens from that opening price to the closing price. All right, so those are the three different moves we looked at. I didn't do this implied earnings, so let's come back to the implied earnings move here. So the implied earnings move, right? These are what the straddles implied the earnings right before the release. So, you know, right up to the end of the day, where did the straddle price close and what was the move that it implied for the earnings. And this is an important reference point, because if you're trading the straddle, right, you might not even care about trading the earnings move itself. But if you're trying to anticipate where that straddle might close, let's say it's early in the morning. Let's say right now it's 9 a.m. before earnings. Let's say it's 9 a.m. and you're looking at the straddle, all right, and you're thinking about, well, if it's 9 a.m. and where do I think that straddle price will close at the end of the day? Right now, so you need a reference point, right? You need some kind of reference point in range. So we could see here that that on average, the McDonald's straddle close was 3% with a high, the range 4.3% versus 1.9% low, and the median of 2.9%. Okay, so that's where the straddle premium on average closed, going all the way back to 2014. If we wanted to do third quarter, take a look at that. It's about 3%. And this could help you out, because what if, if you're looking, to play that and the straddle opens very low in the morning, 9 a.m., 9:30, 9:40, it opens at 2%, 2.5%. If you're playing that move, in anticipation, how much could that straddle appreciate from the morning to the close, or even from the previous day? So though it's an important reference point just for that reason, not even the earnings move itself, but where do you think that straddle will end up right before earnings, right? Or is it too high or too low right before the end of the day? Well, I'm at 9:30 right now.
Yeah, we had one question. I was waiting for you to come up for air. Michael was asking, what time does the VWAP start going through its process? What time in the morning?
The pre-market VWAP?
Yeah.
So the pre-market VWAP, I believe, kicks off at after 7 o'clock, like 7:15, maybe 7:15 a.m. And again, the reason is because there's barely any trading between 4 a.m. and 7 a.m. and then so we're doing other processes, to make it more efficient between that time, gathering, because in the morning we have a lot of processes kicking off to prepare data for that day. All right, so there's lots of stuff coming in the morning that we're preparing, and we looked at it, but from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. there's barely any type of trading going on. So right when that cycle hits, where we see, usually it starts out once the press releases start coming in with news, which is like around 7 a.m. That's when we start kicking off so you'll be able to see, what happened prior to that. Here, I'll go to the pre-market in SPY. So does the pre-market SPY VWAP here. So once we start updating, you'll be able to go back, and see at 4 a.m. what was trading at 4 a.m. But again, the SPY would be probably one of the busier on a consistent basis stocks. So you could go back up to 4 a.m., but we start updating this around 7 a.m. when we start running the process.
All right, D. Great job. We're right at the opening bell right now.
Yep. All right.
We'll end there. Great job, my friend.
Yep. Everyone, thank you for joining. Stay safe out there. Have a great trading day, and hope to see you guys